celebratory or the elegiac nature of such occasions in terms of giving people solace in their grief, but I don't think there's any doubt of the grief on the faces of the royal family. We've heard applause as they've marched. Bill here, passing under a key ceremonial.
Going through Horse Guards Arch, leaving the official palace area. This is where heads of state are greeted, coming to see the sovereign. And as they go through the arch, which is guarded by the Household Cavalry, the King's Lifeguard will have turned out and will salute the coffin as it goes out onto Whitehall. As you can see, they've had to adjust and very skillfully negotiate this ancient arch. In the rear of the Garrison Sergeant Major, who's absolutely critical to all of this, Sergeant Major Andrew Stakes, Costume Guards. The royal family. King's Equerry.
Well, as Bill said, the procession now emerges onto Whitehall, the acknowledged centre of government named after the palace, once Henry VIII's main residence. And of course, soon the Queen's coffin will pass both the cenotaph, the Remembrance Sunday service, something she was loath under any reason at all to miss, and it will then pass Downing Street, home of the 15 Prime Ministers from Winston Churchill to Liz Truss that she oversaw in her reign, performing her duties as constitutional monarch with a dexterity and subtlety that I think it's fair to say pretty much everyone admired.
the service given by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
The regiment at the base of the catafalque on which lies Queen Elizabeth's coffin. This symbolically returns the colour to the monarch, and it will be later returned to Windsor Castle. Start of the vigil, watches of 6 hours, with each vigil within the watch of 20 minutes. Similar to that in Edinburgh with the Royal Company of Archers.
Rod now appearing on the right of your screens here, ultimately responsible for security throughout the precincts of the House of Commons. Leading up the procession out, two speakers of the Lords and Lindsay Hoyle of the Commons just half a pace behind her.
Solemn duty for the ceremony of the procession concluded after that very beautiful service at which we heard the choir of Westminster Abbey and the choir of His Majesty's Chapel Royal, St James's Palace. As the family now prepare to return to Buckingham Palace, the coffin of Her late Majesty the Queen at rest now in the great Westminster Hall, the cross of Westminster at the head of the coffin.
You can probably hear cries of God save the King and long live the King as they make their way back to the palace there, following on from the ripples of quiet applause that greeted the Queen's coffin at almost every point along the route. Worth remarking too on the
duty of the Metropolitan Police, whose ranks have been swelled by police officers from across the country this afternoon, not only to accompany the new king, as we're seeing this afternoon, but all along the route. You can perhaps see them on the side of the frame there, all the way along. Police officers keeping watch. Ordinary on a circumstance like this, one might expect the military. This is an extra duty that has been given to the police in service of the late monarch. As one by one, the royal cars file back through the arch into Horse Guards Parade to return to the palace. Their late queen at rest, in silence in Westminster Hall.
See the king and his family making their way back along the Mall, and just a short time ago we heard those cries, "God save the king, long live the king." Once again along the Mall, people clapping to show their appreciation of the family. It's hard to know how to describe what we've just witnessed, other than to say that it was a thing of solemn and sorrowful beauty. And I guess we should never underestimate.
Through the vigil, through the family, but also through the crowd, and how we kind of continue our affection for the Queen for decades ahead. That the person dies, but the relationship and the affection for the person never dies.
And she's left us the most amazing example to follow.
Yeah.
I think.
There was a lovely observation by the Dean of the Chapels Royal, Dame Sarah Mullally, at the service at St Paul's Cathedral. A life lived in the service of others is a rare jewel. It is a jewel that Her late Majesty the Queen wore as a crown.
Oh, that's so good.
And as we saw the crown gleaming in the sunshine as part of the procession, it resonated with exactly that thought, didn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, the power of silence, just this image of everyone heads bowed, is quite something to witness, isn't it, really?
Very profound.
What I found very moving was so often the individuals one sees on these occasions are of a certain age, and when the bearers of the Queen's Company Grenadier Guards took their bearskins off, you suddenly had these young faces
who were only very recently in Iraq. I mean, it's a reminder that ceremonial they may be, but they are, it's the grief in the members of the royal family. Now, of course, one would expect it, but it felt like it was really visible to me, and the sort of impact, King Charles, I know we've talked a lot about it, but having to lose his mother and be king in 1 week is an awful lot for anyone.
Yeah, it really takes its toll, and grief is embodied. It's very physical, and so and he's had to kind of find a way to psychologically come to terms so much whilst being so busy and taking on this enormous new position. I mean, it's overwhelming, I can imagine.
What's wonderful when looking at that view,
The picture.
what we're seeing there, it's the different ages of British history that are represented by the different uniforms. You know, you've got the heralds in their medieval tabards. You've got the gentlemen at arms in their sort of 17th century, whatever they are.
To express it, and in doing that, connect and kind of hold together, even though you're incredibly sad. And it feels amazingly powerful.
The new king observed in his address in this very hall 2 days ago, I think it was, that the life of his mother and her service is threaded through the environment here. Even the light from the north window shines through her Jubilee window, marking her diamond Jubilee. The tower of Big Ben is the Elizabeth Tower, the sundial, the fountain. She is threaded through it, and on top of all of the layers of that we've discussed, but this is the very fabric of the nation.
Absolutely.
We have obviously in the centre of frame Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, sworn in just a day or two before the Queen very sadly passed away. I guess really will miss her wisdom. So many Prime Ministers have talked of the immense value of that in all kinds of ways that, you know, were very hard to know. Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister there, Mark Drakeford on the right of frame, Chris Grayling just front left. Jamie, you were referencing the history earlier. I mean, I must have walked through this hall countless times, you know, just seeing on the top of the crown the sapphire that used to belong to Edward the Confessor. This hall, built by William the Conqueror's son, where Charles I was tried. The monarchy survived that. Hundreds of years on, hard not to argue that the Queen has put it to a very high point with the sort of skill with which she's evolved the constitutional role, I guess you would say.
Absolutely, and it's in the fabric of the place. I mean, Westminster Hall is still retained by the Crown, whereas the rest of the Palace of Westminster was made over by the Queen, I think in the 1960s. But retaining the William the Conqueror's Great Hall.
Young choristers too, gazing on. I mean, what a moment to stand in this great hall as a child to witness this.
What a moment.
And the black armbands, the evident often not done that.
But this view really symbolises, almost more powerfully than anything you can imagine, the Crown in Parliament and the relationship, as you would saying, Tom, within our constitution of a parliamentary democracy, but a monarchy at the same time. And aren't we lucky to reflect the mood and the feelings of the people, which the Queen did so brilliantly at the time of the pandemic. There's no question about it. So I agree with you. There have been moments where that hasn't been the case, and at times it's been quite dangerous. It's not just the Civil War, but it's in the long morning of Queen Victoria, for instance, where there was a danger of irrelevance, if we're being honest, at that time. I think in the great crises of the 20th century is where, and it goes back to the point that Julie was making about when times are hard, we need to stick together. During those great crises, we had monarchs on the throne who read it wonderfully well, and they were also wonderfully well.
I just wanted to pick up on something that you were talking about the
Uwi guys.
Faith today, and I think you referred to it as a handrail.
Kunti na lang yung tao.
I think what
Tapos
we've
na
seen
kasi.
today is the handrail of
Meron pa
For
doon.
the people watching today, those
Kaya lang
lying in
kanina
the
pa
streets,
ako. Kaya
the
ano,
familiar
pagod na din ako
sight
nag-video.
of the
Kaya uwi na lang
uniforms,
ako.
the marching, the sound of muffled Big Ben in
May dalawang
Elizabeth
screen
Tower
doon.
behind me here. All of those things take them back.
May mga toilets
to their
din kung
childhood.
gusto mo
There are
punta sa
many
toilet.
occasions that we've seen this wonderful British ceremony
Marami pa rin tao
in
doon.
the past, and we see it, we witness it again. And I wonder whether that does provide a comfort for the public,
Ganda manood, guys.
as well as for the family itself. And as you were saying, the idea of history here is extraordinary in this Westminster Hall.
Uwi na din ako. Bye, guys. Salamat sa pag-watch sa video. Thank you so much. Love you all.
As Tom said earlier, the trial.
Ang dami ring mabiling mga pagkain, guys. Ayan o, nagtayo sila. Hanggang doon. May mga bilihan ng pagkain. Naglagay sila. Dahil sa tribute ni Queen Elizabeth. May mabibili dyan na pagkain kung magutom. Ayan o. May pizza, may burgers, fish and chips. Hanggang doon. May tinda ng mga pagkain. Ang laki ng park na ito, guys.
The counter to that, I agree with what you're saying. It has been meticulously over many, many years. With the wedding, you had to wait to see what the bride wanted.
There is presumably at the heart of all of this a dedication to honouring the late Queen's wishes, and we know, of course,